to Tony. It's the Tony Awards tonight, I believe. We got Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone to talk some Ohio State football. And Tony, I'm glad that you as well could take part tonight. You can see the planning that went into the set display tonight.
Did you have those balloons on hand, like in a drawer somewhere, and then blew them up as you got when you came home? Is that what that is?
I actually had plenty of hot air to pump those up right before I started talking.
So you got those tied down.
I think I tossed the last one up there as I was hitting the record button with my left hand. I would
like to offer my congratulations as well. I cannot do it as well as Tony did, laying it all out there, everything that you've done, but it's always a pleasure to do the show, talk Buckeyes as we do talk college football, because it's easy. It's just really easy.
It's an easy job.
No, I meant what you do makes it easy. Come on.
Well, yeah, we have a great discussion, and I do have. I told somebody recently that had something complimentary to say that I may not have much talent, but I have an eye for it. So I bring in the very best, including we just always have a good time, whether it's informative, fun, some combination of both, in breaking down Ohio State football. So I appreciate you stopping on down here tonight to help us celebrate, but we'll talk some Ohio State football, and I'm trying to remember exactly where we left off, but I will just kind of let you take it away in regards to, maybe some quick takes from the spring and the spring game. And I know we did talk about the spring game, and it didn't mean a whole lot. We do have a quarterback situation that's very much in flux with Gunnar Hoak. I have to admit, Tony, my memory of his recruiting value was much higher than it turned out to be when I looked back, because I remember Gunnar Hoak going to Kentucky. This was supposed to be a big deal. Well, I may have been saturated with Kentucky folks at the time or something, because then I look back and he was like the 40th rated pro style quarterback. But I certainly remember him leaving Dayton. He's from Dayton, correct? Dublin, Ohio, of course, just outside of Columbus.
Exactly.
And signing with the Wildcats and Mark Stoops, but he's back in the Buckeye State.
Yeah, and you mentioned having this perceived value of him back then. His value has increased once he hit the transfer portal and was really a must-get guy for Ohio State, and was probably on their radar beforehand, because he was a guy that, on my podcast, we had talked about back in the winter, maybe when Tate Martell transferred, that this is a guy that you might want to watch out for, because he is a Buckeye legacy. His dad was a Buckeye. His uncle was a Buckeye and a former defensive coordinator at Ohio State. He had a cousin as a middle linebacker at Ohio State. So he's a Buckeye through and through. His family still had season tickets to Ohio State, even as their son is at Kentucky. And I'm sure they went to those games as well. But so, he was a Buckeye through and through. And he had Kentucky, Syracuse offers of that ilk. So he's played 5 games in his 3 years in Kentucky, and those all came last year. So he's not had a lot of playing time, didn't play any as a redshirt freshman, but he's going to come into a situation right now where he'll be trying to win the starting job, but more likely he'll be competing with Chris Chuganoff, who was a grad transfer last year, who showed up in August to provide some necessary depth. And, we'll find out. I mean, it's going to be an interesting battle at backup as the backup quarterback, because those guys are one snap away. And you've got Justin Fields, the likely starter, who is a very good runner and likes to run. And if he takes the wrong kind of hit, either while running or, while throwing, then that guy comes in. And now you're looking at a situation where Ohio State has national title aspirations, but how much do they have to dial it down if something happens to Fields? Now you're going with Gunnar Hoak or Chris Chuganoff.
I don't know that there's been anything overblown as much as Justin Fields' stat line at the spring game. Not that there wasn't concern, not that there wasn't misfires, and not that he didn't look less than great. But I remember your evaluation and again, this is without much adversity on the practice field, but just in terms of the evaluation of sheer talent on the field and the rotation of the ball. cutting through the wind, that type of, eye-popping talent. And did you get a decent read? And I know that the access is limited, but how well he performed day to day, and not just, 4 for 13 in the spring game. This guy's a bust, man. We got major concerns here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he was clearly the starter. That's one of the reasons why Matthew Baldwin is no longer at Ohio State. And there's, other reasons as well, wanting to be closer to home. But if he had won the job or not lost the job, he'd still be a Buckeye. I truly believe that, because as we've said on my podcast, how often can you name a starting quarterback that transferred to be closer to home? When does that doesn't happen. And so that's not the situation here either. But Justin Fields and I ran a piece this week from Ohio State receiver KJ Hill saying that Fields has a stronger arm than Dwayne Haskins. But what set Haskins apart was the accuracy and the timing and ball placement, which is elite. I think is the best in the nation last year in terms of quarterback prospects. So comparing Justin Fields to that is not fair. Dwayne Haskins is the best quarterback in school history. Let's let Justin Fields be as good as Braxton Miller. Maybe just set that level and then go from there. Because in terms of his throwing, I would probably put him around 2012 Braxton Miller. Which was decent, but the quarterbacks before Dwayne Haskins would always tank a little bit in their accuracy once November hit, and that was where Dwayne Haskins did not do that. And I want to see, can Justin Fields maintain that level? Because if he can play well in November, then I think that's going to be the key in terms of that's where the tougher games are. But as far as expectations, people I think need to temper them, but he still has all of the tools that you would want in a quarterback. Every single team in the nation would love to have him, and fans would too.
I hate to admit this. This is really bad on this night in particular, but the Braxton Miller comparison seems so obvious now, but I hadn't made it. It just in regards to mobility, size, throwing ability, arm strength, but not necessarily polish at this point. And when you say 2012 Braxton Miller, Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, but very unpolished as a quarterback, but just a physical specimen, a guy that obviously had the running ability to roll up eye-popping total yardage type of numbers.
Yeah, and he doesn't have Braxton's straight-ahead speed or his agility, but he's closer to Braxton as a runner than JT Barrett. If you have the two at polls, he's going to be over towards the Braxton Miller end. And he is, just watching him a little bit in practice, he was very effective with the read option. And it's something that I think the Buckeye defense didn't get to see a lot last year in practice with Dwayne Haskins. And maybe there's some of that, but also you can't hit him in practice. So he's going to look okay running the ball. But in terms of his 4 of 13 in the spring game, I went through and charted that, and his first 2 passes were batted down, and then he had 2 other passes that were uncatchable, and everything else either was caught or went off of receivers' hands. So of his 2 passes that actually left the line of scrimmage, only 2 of those of the 11 were uncatchable. So, no, 4 of 13 is never great, but if you look at it a little bit closer, that's not the starting offensive line. It's not the entire starting offensive line. You're mixing in receivers. You're mixing in all kinds of different things. Timing is still, it was the 15th practice, and I'm sure he's looked better in practices, and he won the job or was with the ones pretty early on, and we never really saw him with running with the twos except for maybe the first or second practice, and that was just rotating with Matthew Baldwin. Every other time we saw him, he was with the ones, and anytime we would talk to Ryan Day about that, he would be like, "No, that's don't read into that." But of course, 1 month later, and Matthew Baldwin is now at TCU.
Yeah, 13 pass sample is pretty
exactly.
Limited. It's
and Dwayne Haskins wasn't good in last year's spring game either. He was good in the year before, but you can't really judge too much off of that. It's 1 of 15 practices, and it's a practice where he, like you said, he throws 11 passes compared to any other practice where he's probably throwing 60,